Well, global atomic monitors have reported that Iran's stockpile of highly enriched uranium has swelled to a record in the last 3 months. And that's despite the protests that are gripping the country. Simone Foxman has the detail. The question that goes through our mind, Simone, is to what extent does that build-up complicate the stance that Europe and the US have taken towards Iran recently? Does it challenge the JCPOA coming back to life?
Absolutely, because this data really gets at the heart of what the JCPOA, the 2015 Iran nuclear deal, was meant to accomplish. The idea was to make the time between Iran's current capabilities on a nuclear front and the achievement of the technology needed to build a nuclear weapon, to make that time a year or more. But the presence of all this highly enriched uranium suggests that time is actually way less. Some experts even say that it's zero. At the same time, we're looking at these protests across the country. We're also looking at the presence of Iranian drones that seem to have been used by Russia on the ground in Ukraine. And this is making it very difficult for politicians across Europe, the United States, to try and consider any discussion of the Iran nuclear deal. So that's why we're hearing this lovely, optimistic statement from the Director General of the IAEA, the UN's Atomic Monitoring Agency. The JCPOA is not dead, okay. But we also heard EU Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell urge G7 foreign ministers to try and distinguish between their support for the protesters and their desire for Iran not to become a nuclear power. But really what sources tell me, and a lot of the reporting indicates, is that these talks, maybe they're not dead, but they're very, very close, Menace.
And in Qatar itself, 9 days to go, Simone, until literally the world descends on Qatar. And we understand, this is more, I suppose, a political statement, isn't it? Direct flights between Israel and Qatar.
Yeah, that's right. Now, Qatari officials came out and said, this is temporary, first off, and it doesn't change our stance on potential normalization with Israel. This is not a sign that we're itching to go along with Bahrain or the UAE on those Abraham Accords. However, Qatar didn't necessarily have to do this. Frankly, most of the fans that are coming from Israel, whether Israeli or Palestinian, were probably figuring out other ways to get to the country if they were going to come to the tournament. And that's why we saw praise come in from the United States, actually calling this temporary and very limited agreement historic. I will pour a little bit of cold water on this. Again, beyond these statements that this is very limited, it's temporary, there is the idea that any escalation in the situation between Palestinians and Israelis might end this agreement. Also, we are expecting to see a new, much more hawkish Israeli government come into power over the next couple of weeks. Do they try and stand in the way of this deal? Unclear to me at the moment.
Yeah, it is indeed. Let's talk about the latest flurry of criticism towards Qatar over this World Cup. It has mounting levels of criticism, isn't there? But this time it's on the green agenda. They promised something about how green it would be, and the reality might be something different.
Yeah, Qatar actually promised in the bidding process that this would be a net zero, a carbon neutral World Cup, but they're having difficulty proving that to the world. And there are two things that researchers really take issue with. One is just the estimation total of the amount of carbon emissions that this tournament is going to generate. Researchers believe that Qatar is underestimating by about 50% the amount of carbon emissions, particularly around the building projects of the stadiums and infrastructure needed to prepare for the World Cup. We're also going to see a lot of flights in and out of the country in the coming weeks. Those are not great for the environment. So even though fans who may be staying in the first World Cup to be held in a single city in the modern era and going around by metro and the like, they're still going to have to get in an airplane really to get here. Those are the two big concerns. Also the concerns about carbon credits generally. That's the way Qatar is trying to offset some of these emissions. Just adding another flavor to the criticism that we were hearing. Again, you talked about how there's so much criticism right now. Does this change when the play on the pitch gets going, Menace?